In Canada, we have constitutional rights.
With a big fat asterisk.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie, and today we are taking a trip back to some Canadian vlog material and Bill 96 coming out of Quebec. What does it mean? A lot of this is going to come as a big shock and a surprise to those of you who don't live in Quebec or Canada, but it is going to be worth the legal voyage, so
come along with me, shall you?
Now, I am from Quebec, and in the Canadian geopolitical landscape, Quebec is said to be a unique province because it's the only French province in Canada. As far as the law goes, it's the only province in Canada that has the French Napoleonic Civil Code, or the Civil Code that is the descendant of the Napoleonic Code, whereas the rest of Canada is common law. So while I do consider every province in Canada to be unique, in a way Quebec is uniquely unique in that it has certain different types of laws and it has certain different types
of language laws.
More specifically, we have the Charter of the French Language, also known as Bill 101, and in case you don't know what Bill 101 is, here is the synopsis from Wikipedia. The Charter of the French Language, French La Charte de la Langue Française, the Charter, also known in English as Bill 101 or Law 101, French Loi 101, is a law in the province of Quebec in Canada defining French, the language of the majority of the population, as the official language of the provincial government. It is the central legislative piece in Quebec's language policy and one of the three statutory documents Quebec society bases its cohesion upon, along with the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and the Civil Code of Quebec. The Charter also protects the indigenous languages of Quebec. The law came into effect in 1977. Prior to that, Quebec had no official language, and the purpose of the law was to preserve the French language in the province of Quebec. And in order to do that, the law implemented a number of policies which could be summarized as follows. Objective: the preamble of the Charter states that the National Assembly resolved, quote, to make French the language of the government and the law, as well as the normal and everyday language of work, instruction, communication, commerce, and business, end quote. It also states that the National Assembly is to pursue this objective, quote, in a spirit of fairness and open-mindedness, end quote, recognizes, quote, the right of the Amerinds and the Inuit of Quebec, the first inhabitants of this land, to preserve and develop their original language and culture, end quote. Bill 101 set out certain fundamental French language rights, which are the following. The fundamental French language rights in Quebec are 1. The right to have the civil administration, the health services and social services, the public utility enterprises, the professional corporations, the associations of employees, and all enterprises doing business in Quebec communicate with the public in French. The right to speak French in deliberative assemblies, the right of workers to carry on their activities in French, the right of consumers to be informed and served in French, the right of persons eligible for instruction in Quebec to receive that instruction in French. Notwithstanding all of this, laws need to be published in both French and English. People are entitled to plead or make representations before the courts in either French or English. That being said, in case of any inconsistency between the French and English versions of any law,
the French version prevails.
For anyone who wants to know why some companies don't do business in Quebec, the cost of doing business in Quebec is a little bit higher than elsewhere because all labels have to be in French. You can have another language on those labels, but the French portion of the labels has to be at least as big as the English or other language on those labels. When it comes to outdoor signage, a similar rule applies. You have to have French, you can have English or another language, but the French version has to be nettement prédominante, as we say in French. It has to be markedly predominant, and this was confirmed by the Supreme Court of Canada. Signs and posters must be in French, and they may also be in another language provided French is markedly predominant. A recognized trademark within the meaning of the Trademarks Act may appear exclusively in a language other than French unless a French version has been registered. Where a trademark is displayed outside a building exclusively in a language other than French, a sufficient presence of French must also be ensured. Who on earth enforces compliance with these laws, you might be asking? Good question. In Quebec, we have something called the Office de la Langue Française, the OLF, or as some people humorously refer to it as the Language Police, who literally enforce the provisions of Bill 101. And the enforcement of the provisions of Bill 101 have led to multiple lawsuits that have gone all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada, which have reaffirmed the constitutionality of the requirement to have French as the nettement prédominant, the markedly predominant element of the signage in order to preserve the French language in Quebec. And an interesting tidbit of information that some of you out there may not know, you all know of Tim Hortons. It's more Canadian than maple syrup on bacon. Well, Tim Hortons used to be Tim Hortons '(S) because there was originally only one of the shops, Tim Horton, named after the hockey player who incidentally died in a drunk driving accident. There was originally only one store. It was Tim Hortons '(S). Now the '(S), as far as language laws go, is a specifically English expression. In French, there is no apostrophe S, so it became a problem when you had apostrophe S's as signage. If you didn't want to have a nettement prédominant French version, you had to do something with that apostrophe. So to avoid having to have two signages, one in French and one in English with the apostrophe S, Tim Hortons basically dropped the apostrophe so that they could have one brand for all of Canada, so that they did not have to have Tim Hortons apostrophe S elsewhere in Canada and Tim Hortons without the apostrophe S in Quebec. So that is a very brief history of Quebec's Bill 101, and it is a good preamble into what is the subject matter for this vlog, which is Bill 96, which is an act to amend Bill 101. According to the François Legault government, in the 40 years since Bill 101 has been enacted, it apparently did not achieve its desired goal, such that we need to impose even more stricter measures under Bill 96 to further preserve the French language in Quebec. Now, let me just preface this by saying that I actually don't have problems with laws that are intended to preserve the French language in Quebec. I appreciate Quebec is historically a French province, and I appreciate that the province wants to preserve its French identity. The only questions I have is the efficiency of the laws by which they want to preserve the French culture, and if the law that they have had on the books for 40 years did not achieve that purpose, it's not clear that more laws are going to more achieve that purpose. And as far as some of the changes proposed in Bill 96 are concerned, if we thought Bill 101 was tough, Bill 96 makes things even tougher in Quebec, and I'm not sure that it makes them tougher in a way that is actually going to preserve the French language. I think it makes it tougher in a way that's just going to penalize French Canadians. French in Quebec. Here are the main changes proposed in Bill 96. The proposed legislation tabled Thursday is 100 pages long and includes 201 articles. Because if the first law did not achieve its desired goals in 40 years, create another law that is so long nobody can possibly understand what's in it, and hopefully that will achieve the desired objectives. Canadian Constitution. Bill 96 proposes adding 2 clauses to the Canadian Constitution Act of 1867 under the section on, quote, fundamental characteristics of Quebec, end quote. Quote, Quebecers form a nation, end quote. Quote, French shall be the only official language of Quebec. It is also the common language of the Quebec nation, end quote. And here is the part that is probably going to irk the rest of Canada. Other provinces would not have to be involved in the alterations to the Constitution. Just Ottawa and Quebec, the CAQ says. And for those of you who may not know, the CAQ, the CAQ, which is a relatively unfortunate acronym, is the Coalition Avenir de Québec. That is François Legault's party in Quebec. That is the current governing party in Quebec. Now, to explain why this is somewhat problematic, and this is not a political statement, this is just a common sense statement, we have a Constitution of Canada that binds all of the provinces, and the idea that one province could unilaterally amend the Constitution that applies to all of the country and all of the provinces, that could irk the other provinces. Or it creates the precedent, which is equally dangerous, that the Constitution of Canada can be unilaterally amended by any single province with the authorization or permission of Ottawa. That could be a problem, but when it comes to provisions of this Bill 96 that are going to penalize French Canadians, let's get into it. Sageps and Education. For those of you who don't live in the province or who don't know what Sageps are, it's higher education sort of after high school but before university. It could be 2-year programs, it could be 4-year programs. It is something like college. It's in between high school and university. Arguing that enrollment at French Sageps is dropping while more students are going to English Sageps, the CAQ proposes that the total number of students allowed in English language Sageps would be capped at 17.5% of the total provincial Sagep population, corresponding to the same level as last year. The bill stipulates the percentage of students in English Sageps can never be higher than in the previous year. Priority would be given to English language students for English Sageps. Access to English language programs in French Sageps would be reduced. As total enrollment increases, the increase in English Sageps would be limited to 8.7% of new spots. Translation, because that level of legalese can be confusing even in English, that basically says that the CAQ wants to limit French people's ability to study higher education in English. In order to preserve the French language, the government wants to prohibit or limit the ability of French Quebecers to study in English. And they also want to reduce English programs in French Sageps. If you are a member of the CAQ government, you are saying that this is going to help preserve the French language, and if you're someone else, you might be thinking that this is only going to penalize French Canadians and make them unable to compete on the international scale. And that reduces the debate to the essential question: are you preserving a culture, are you preserving a language by creating laws that are actually only going to handicap the people you are allegedly trying to protect? So it is arguable whether or not laws like this, which effectively are only going to cripple the population itself, are going to do anything to preserve the actual language. All it's actually going to do is penalize Quebec as a whole, because it's going to make it prohibitively expensive, almost inconvenient to do business here, and we're going to get to those provisions in a second. But the bottom line is that if you have had 40 years under a relatively strict Bill 101 to preserve the French language and you do not feel that it has achieved its purpose, more laws are not necessarily going to achieve that purpose. It might actually do the exact opposite. Citizens who don't get served in French can file complaints with the OQLF, Office Québécois de la Langue Française, against the owners of the commerce by phone or launch a civil case if it involves a larger store. Being greeted with, quote, bonjour, hi, end quote, would not be considered a violation of a person's right to be served in French, the CAQ said Thursday. If you needed any further evidence why bigger government does not necessarily solve problems any better, we actually had a debate in Quebec as to whether or not serving people, greeting people when they entered your store with bonjour, hi, violated the provisions of Bill 101.
I kid you not.
The OQLF will be given greater powers to ensure, quote, the respect of the Charter of the French language, even in the absence of a complaint, end quote. What could possibly go wrong there? Even in the absence of a complaint, the OQLF can still get involved, but if you had any lingering doubts as to the deterrent effect that this law could have on small business, wait until you get to this provision of the law. In the workplace, the bill proposes that the regulations of Bill 101 enforcing the usage of French be extended to workplaces with 25 to 49 employees, as well as federal workplaces. Companies that have not attained the government objective for usage of French in the workplace will have to put in place a program that ensures they do in order to obtain French certification. Quote, because the requirement of knowing a language other than French in order to attain a position has become too commonplace, Bill 96 aims to reverse this tendency, end quote, a government presentation explaining the bill states. Before requiring knowledge of a language other than French, employers must assess the linguistic needs of the work involved or whether another employee has the linguistic knowledge necessary, quote, in order to limit the number of positions requiring this competency, end quote. Employees can take legal recourse if they think their linguistic rights are not being met at work. And then getting to another big part of this law, which relates to bilingual municipalities. The bill proposes taking away the bilingual status of any municipality that does not have a population of at least 50% English speakers. Cities and boroughs that want to preserve their status can adopt a resolution to that effect. They will have 4 months after the adoption of the bill to do so. So that is an overview of the most essential elements of Bill 96. Basically, Bill 96 is a more invasive version of Bill 101, and as you can easily surmise, it seeks to limit certain fundamental rights of Quebec citizens.
And how can it do that?
I want to know.
We are citizens. We have fundamental constitutional rights. We have a constitution in this country. Yes, we do. We have a constitution with a big fat asterisk, and that big fat asterisk is known as the Notwithstanding clause in the Constitution. And what does that Notwithstanding clause say? Well, it says that you have certain fundamental rights that cannot be violated, except the government can violate them if it does so specifically by way of law. What? What the f- Section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is part of the Constitution of Canada. It is commonly known as the Notwithstanding Clause, or la clause dérogatoire in French, or as the override power, and it allows Parliament or provincial legislatures to temporarily override certain portions of the Charter. Parliament or the legislature of a province may expressly declare in an act of Parliament or of the legislature, as the case may be, that the act or a provision thereof shall operate notwithstanding a provision included in Section 2 or Sections 7 to 15. But don't worry, the overriding of your constitutional rights as protected in the Constitution, which also provides for a method of overriding that constitutional right, it has a limited time period, and you can't do it forever. You can only do it for 5 years. A declaration made under subsection 1 shall cease to have effect 5 years after it comes into force or on such earlier date as may be specified in the declaration. Parliament or the legislature of any province may reenact a declaration made under subsection 1. Translation, because even this legalese can be somewhat confusing in English, the Constitution guarantees you certain rights, but there is a notwithstanding clause in that very same Constitution that allows for the overriding of certain constitutional rights. Don't worry, you can't do it forever. You can only do it for 5 years, except for you can renew it every 5 years if you so choose. Now, the argument here is that it has a 5-year limit because in theory there should be provincial elections every 5 years, so if you're unhappy with a government overriding your constitutional rights, you can vote them out of office at the next election, and if you don't, they can renew that overriding if they so choose, and then you can vote them out later on if you so choose. The history of the notwithstanding clause is interesting. It's when we were making our new constitution in 1982, the provinces were a little afraid that we were giving all of our power to the Supreme Court, so they wanted to include this notwithstanding clause in the Constitution so that provinces could make laws clause, notwithstanding Supreme Court decisions. The idea for the clause was proposed by Peter Lockheed as suggested by Merv Leach. The clause was a compromise reached during the debate over the new constitution in the early 1980s. Among the province's major complaints with the charter was its effect of shifting power from elected officials to the judiciary, giving the courts the final word. Section 33, in conjunction with the limitations clause in Section 1, was intended to give provincial legislatures more leverage to pass law. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau at first strongly objected to the clause, but eventually consented to its inclusion under pressure from the provincial premiers. The Parliament of Canada, a provincial legislature, or a territorial legislature may declare that one of its laws or part of a law applies temporarily, quote, notwithstanding, end quote, countermanding sections of the Charter, thereby nullifying any judicial review by overriding the Charter protections for a limited period of time. This is done by including a section in the law clearly specifying which rights have been overridden. A simple majority vote in any of Canada's 14 jurisdictions may suspend the core rights of the Charter. However, the rights to be overridden must be either a, quote, fundamental right, end quote, guaranteed by Section 2, such as freedom of expression, religion, or association, a, quote, legal right, end quote, guaranteed by Sections 7 to 14, such as rights to liberty and freedom from search and seizures and cruel and unusual punishment, or a Section 15, quote, equality right. Other rights, such as Section 6 mobility rights, democratic rights, and language rights are inviolable.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
So the Charter contains certain core rights which can be easily overridden by a law. That is one heck of an interesting way of viewing a core right. But other rights are inviolable, like mobility rights. Well, we've seen how those rights are inviolable when we have been forbidden from traveling interprovincially during the context of this pandemic. It seems that in Canada we have no core rights.
And we have no inviolable rights.
Why are we talking about the notwithstanding clause? Well, it seems that François Legault, the leader of the CAQ, is reflexively using this notwithstanding clause in order to jam through Bill 96 because it clearly violates our fundamental rights, and he's doing this as a first reflex and not as a last resort. This Bill 96 clearly violates fundamental rights of Quebec citizens, and François Legault, in order to jam it through, is just going to invoke the notwithstanding clause out of convenience without any sort of discourse, dialogue, negotiations. Nope, just going right for the notwithstanding clause to violate your rights as an instinct, as a reflex, and not as an exception. And heck, if you have seen what he has gotten away with in the last year and a half, why would this come as a surprise to anybody? Alright, so that is the vlog. Welcome to the wild world of Quebec. I hope you've enjoyed your stay. Please be sure to tune in again and come back and visit, drop a comment, all those things, because it helps feed the algorithm.
Please, sir, I want some more.
If you want to support the channel, all of the support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube membership. We've got merch. Robert Barnes and I do weekly live streams every Sunday. We do weekly streams every Wednesday with a guest called The Sidebar. You can also support us on Locals if you want. You can find us at
vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, which is doing live streaming as well and allows for comments during those live streams, so you can follow me there. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well. And now you know your vlog. Now you know your vlog. Now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!